The day had leaned dry and windless. Dust hung in the air like forgotten breath, and the heat clung low to the earth. Along the gravel edge of an old farm road, a man stepped from his truck, boots crunching softly beneath him. He hadn't meant to stop, just a flicker in the periphery, a motion too small for the eye but too insistent for the heart to ignore. And then came the sound. Thin, fragile, not quite a bark, more a whimper that had no strength to reach full voice. He walked slowly, scanning the scrub grass and rusted wire fence. The noise came again, softer now, as if the effort itself was slipping away. Near a cluster of discarded boards and wild weeds, he saw a shape. Not moving, not upright, just barely there. A puppy. Dust-colored and thin as breath. Its fur was matted with earth and thistle, ribs faintly visible beneath a coat that had once tried to be golden. It didn't lift its head, only its eyes. The man knelt beside it, speaking no words at first. There was no rush, no panic, just a quiet sort of noticing. The pup's body trembled with each breath, legs tucked in tightly, as if trying to disappear into the dirt. Its tail didn't wag. Its tongue, dry and pale, barely flicked out to wet its nose. One ear twitched in response to the man's presence. Not from fear, but perhaps confusion. "It's okay," the man whispered. "I see you." He held out his hand, palm open, fingers loose. The pup didn't flinch. Its gaze stayed steady, hollow but anchored. This wasn't the wild panic of an abandoned stray. This was the stillness of something holding on with the last threads it had left. The man took a shallow breath, eyes scanning the nearby brush. A farm once operated nearby, long closed now. People had come and gone, fences broke, dogs wandered, some stayed, most didn't. But something in this moment felt held. The dog was starving, yes, dehydrated and fading fast, but there was something else. It was looking past him, not through him. Carefully, the man slid a hand beneath the pup's chest. Bones shifted under the skin. The puppy didn't resist, just let its weight settle into the cradle of his arm. Its head fell weakly against his wrist, but then, as he began to stand, it shifted. A soft, strained movement, a paw reaching out toward the brush, not randomly, but almost in indication. Then the eyes again, locking with his, then flicking back. The man paused. "Show me, then," he said quietly. He lowered the pup again, letting its feet touch earth. The small creature, impossibly fragile, took one trembling step, then another. Its legs wobbled, and for a moment it nearly collapsed. But the will inside it held. Not for itself, it seemed, but for something more. It stopped and waited. I looked back at him, then forward again, toward the overgrowth. A trail of barely their paw prints led into a tangle of dry stems and broken wood. The man followed, not close but not far, just enough to stay present, to not press too much. The air changed here, cooler, shaded under a lean-to of wild growth. There was no sound but the soft pant of the puppy ahead and the dry whisper of grass rubbing against itself. They moved only a few dozen yards, but it felt longer, drawn by something unsaid, a thread of quiet urgency that pulled without force. The puppy stopped near a dent in the ground where leaves had collected and wind had shaped a shallow hollow. It stood there, sides heaving, eyes once more meeting the man's before collapsing softly onto its side, exhausted. The man crouched again, lowering his gaze to where the pup now lay curled beside the shallow dip in the earth. And that's when he heard it, fainter than before. A sound like the first breath after sleep. Not from the pup, from beneath the leaves. The man's eyes narrowed. Whatever this little one had led him to, it wasn't just about being found. It was about what still needed saving. The man kept his posture low, his steps quiet. The air inside the brush felt still and close, thick with the scent of dry soil and brittle leaves. The puppy had collapsed, but only for a moment. When he'd reached to lift it again, it pushed itself up. Trembling legs, shallow breath, but an intent in its body that pulled forward. Something in it had not given up. Not yet. It moved as if tethered to something beyond exhaustion. Not for escape, not for survival, for return. It limped ahead, one foot dragging slightly. Each step disturbed the undergrowth, revealing old pathways made not by deer or wild boar, but by small, repeated movements, the kind made by animals too young to part the branches on their own. The man followed at a slight distance, careful not to startle but close enough to offer help if needed. His hands remained loose at his sides, and his breath came slow, syncing with the rhythm of the pup's shuffling gait. The terrain grew uneven. Rusted fencing lay half-buried beneath vines, and thorned twigs scratched lightly against clothing and fur. The pup paused often, its sides rising in strained rhythm, but each time it gathered itself, lowering its head, continuing on. Every step looked like it might be the last, but something within, instinct, memory, perhaps the faint imprint of scent, guided it deeper. The brush opened slightly near a broken wooden gate that once bordered a livestock pen, now long forgotten. In its shadow, a shallow trench curled into the roots of an elder tree. The air shifted there, cooler, dense with the scent of damp leaves and life hidden just beneath the surface. The man slowed, crouching to watch. The pup hesitated at the edge of the trench, then stepped down, body lowering into a crouch. Its head dipped beneath a hanging curtain of dead grass, and for a few seconds there was no sound. Then came a faint rustle, followed by a weak murmur, barely audible, but unmistakable. The man moved closer, parting the grass with his hand. There, beneath the natural shelter of leaves and an old scrap of sheet metal, were 4 small bodies. Puppies. Not newborn, but too young to survive without their mother. Their eyes were open, though barely. Coats are patchy, dull. Bones showed sharply under thin skin. One lay still, unmoving. Another twitched its legs gently, blindly reaching for warmth. The third raised its head slightly, nostrils flaring. The fourth, curled tight, a faint tremor running through its limbs, made a soft, hiccuping sound. The pup that had led the man there collapsed beside them, stretching its thin frame protectively around the others. It did not lick them or nudge them. It simply pressed itself into the hollow where they lay, becoming part of their frail, silent circle. The man's eyes moved across the small den. There was no sign of an adult. No tracks, no scent trail leading away. The pups had been alone long enough for the strongest among them to attempt escape, or rescue. What he had thought was a lost animal turned out to be the guardian of something far more fragile. He crouched at the edge, quiet, steady. The surviving pups were all undernourished, but one in particular drew his attention. It was barely breathing, its chest lifting in shallow, uneven motions. The pup beside it, the one who had led him, nudged it gently with its snout, then stilled again. They waited for someone, the man murmured. His hands moved slowly, gathering the leaves and debris surrounding the nest. He didn't reach for them yet, not until he was sure. The older pup gave no sign of protest. Its body was still, but its eyes watched. Calm, tired, but aware. Birds passed overhead in slow glides. A breeze carried the smell of dry hay and distant wood smoke. Somewhere beyond the trees, a cow called low, a reminder of the world still turning outside this forgotten pocket of survival. The man placed a blanket on the ground nearby, unfolded from his bag with careful hands. It was soft and worn, the kind kept in vehicles for emergencies. He knelt again and reached gently into the nest, lifting one pup at a time. Each was light, too light. Their limbs hung limp, but their ears flicked at his touch. Small responses, signs of life. When he reached for the weakest one, he paused. It was the smallest, not just undergrown but different. Its coat had faint striping, not the soft dapple of a mutt, but something else, a blend of wild and domestic. A noise escaped it. High, rasping, not quite a bark. The man looked closer. Its eyes were only half open but already clearer than the others. The shape of its jaw and the size of its paws are not quite right. But he said nothing. Not yet. He cradled the last of the litter into the blanket and stepped back. The older pup had not moved. It stared at the bundle, then shifted its weight, dragging itself across the ground to curl against the others once more. It buried its nose in the folds of cloth and let out a low exhale, part sigh, part collapse. The man stood still, watching. For a moment, nothing stirred. Then one of the smaller pups made a soft sound, and the older one answered with a faint nudge of its nose. The thread had not broken. Whatever had been lost was not yet gone. They had not been abandoned. They had been waiting. The man didn't move at first. He crouched there, letting the quiet settle over him like dust. The puppies were motionless again, their thin bodies sunk into the loose pile of leaves and soil, as if trying to disappear into the earth. Only the one who had led him here remained alert, though barely. Its breathing had grown shallow, but its posture spoke of duty. Its frame still curved around the others, shoulder trembling slightly as it lay between them and the open world. A wind moved faintly through the trees above, stirring the branches but not reaching the ground. This place was too tucked away, hidden from sight and sound, a forgotten pocket behind the decay of a long-collapsed fence. It had been a makeshift den once. Rusted metal leaned against the roots of a tree, held up by nothing more than habit and time. Someone might have left it there years ago, a scrap from an old shed, now repurposed by a mother desperate to shield her litter from cold nights and rain. But she was gone. That was clear now. The man reached for the blanket again and unfolded it carefully, laying it across the ground just beside the nest. He didn't touch the pups yet. They were alive, but barely. He needed to watch first, to read their signs. The smallest, the one with faint striping and the strange call, was barely breathing. Its mouth opened slightly with each breath, a dry, clicking sound escaping now and then. Its ribs pressed upward with every movement, too pronounced, too fragile. Beside it, another pup shifted, eyes opening briefly. They were still pale and cloudy. Its ears twitched but did not lift. A third remained still, its muzzle tucked against the side of its sibling, hind legs stretched behind like a child too tired to curl. The fourth, slightly larger, let out a low whimper when the breeze touched its back. Its head lifted weakly, then dropped again. He leaned closer. The warmth in the nest was fading. Whatever heat had lingered was leaving fast. The mother had likely been gone for days, maybe more. There were no signs of injury, no blood, no struggle, just absence. A quiet vanishing that left the smallest among them to make their own impossible choice. The older pup had tried. It had crawled out, left the nest, and moved toward the road. Not for food, not for itself, but perhaps because instinct told it that survival required something more than waiting. The others hadn't moved. Their bodies had grown too weak, their bellies too empty. It had done the only thing it could, leave and hope it came back with something, and now they had someone. The man reached out slowly, fingers brushing lightly along the spine of the smallest pup. The skin was dry, almost papery, and the bones felt too close to the surface. Its tail gave a faint twitch, more reflex than awareness. He placed his other hand beneath its belly and lifted it gently, transferring it to the edge of the blanket. It made no sound, just shifted slightly, curling into itself again. One by one, he moved the others. Each was lighter than it should have been. Their paws hung limply, ears folded flat. When placed on the blanket, they remained still for long stretches before making even the slightest adjustment. None resisted. None tried to run. Their energy was gone, used up in the waiting. The final pup he lifted was the one who had brought him. Its body shuddered as he moved it, but it didn't protest. Its eyes remained half open, watching the others as they were gathered. When he placed it down beside them, it leaned in immediately, tucking its nose against the smallest of the group. There was a soft sound, not a whine, not a bark, just a hum of breath that acknowledged the presence of something precious. The man stood and looked around. The space around them was still silent, but no longer in the same way. The hush had changed. Now it held something fragile, something waiting for care. He unzipped his pack, pulled out a small bottle of water, and filled the corner of a cloth with a few drops. Kneeling again, he touched the cloth to the lips of the smallest pup. It stirred, mouth opening briefly. The water moistened its tongue, but most of it slid away. He tried again, gently. A soft whisper left him. "Come on, little one." The pup swallowed once, then stilled. He moved slowly through the others, letting the cloth rest against their mouths. The larger two responded better, tongues reaching weakly, teeth barely grazing the fabric. It wasn't much. It wasn't food, but it was something. He reached again for the striped pup. Now closer, he could see it more clearly. Its fur was not just dirty. It was patterned, subtly but distinctly. Faint gray-black lines traced its legs, unlike the others. The shape of the head was narrower, the ears slightly more erect. Not a different breed, a different kind entirely. Perhaps a mix, perhaps something else. A hitch in a lineage no one expected. The pup opened its eyes once, then closed them again. The man paused, unsure. Questions stirred in him, but they didn't matter yet. What mattered was time. Heat, water, touch. He wrapped the blanket gently around the four pups and lifted them into his arms. Their bodies sank into the fabric, barely shifting as he moved. The older pup made a faint sound, a rasp, low in its throat, but it wasn't a protest. It was the sound of surrender, not to fear, but to rest. As he walked back through the brush, the wind began to rise. It caught the dry grass and made it lean. A long wave passing through the field like breath returning to a sleeping body. The sky was still pale, holding the softness of afternoon light. Behind him, the rusted metal leaned into shadow, the nest now empty but no longer silent. In his arms, the pups did not move, but their bodies pressed closer together, drawn by shared warmth. The oldest let its eyes close completely for the first time. The man kept walking, one careful step at a time. There was a long road ahead, but for now, they were not alone. The clinic was quiet in the early evening, lit by soft amber bulbs and the hum of quiet machines. In the back room, a folded blanket held the four pups close together, the oldest curled protectively around the smaller bodies. Their breathing had stabilized but remained light, rhythmic, and shallow. The man stood nearby, watching in stillness, arms crossed loosely, gaze drifting between them and the vet moving in calm precision beside him. The warmth in the room helped. Each pup now rested beneath layers of cotton cloth with warmed IV fluid bags arranged gently to mimic the body heat they'd gone without. The oldest stirred occasionally, always in response to a sound or shift from the others. I did not sleep deeply. Even in exhaustion, it listened. One of the younger pups had taken a few drops of formula earlier, a tentative tongue reaching for the soft rubber of the syringe. Another had managed only one weak swallow before drifting back into stillness. The smallest remained quiet, though its chest continued to rise and fall. Slow, but present. It was when the vet reached to examine that smallest one again that the difference became clear. Her hands moved gently beneath its ribs, feeling the space between bone and skin. Then she paused. Her brow furrowed slightly and she leaned in, lifting the pup just slightly toward the light. It made a sound, faint, higher pitched than the others. Not a bark, not a whimper. Something almost sharp in its thinness, like the cry of a bird softened by breath. The vet turned the pup's head gently to one side. Its ears were too pointed. The muzzle is longer. The fur, now cleaned of dirt, revealed faint banding across the legs and back, barely visible. But there. The man stepped closer. "What is it?" he asked, voice low. The vet didn't answer right away. She tilted the pup's jaw slightly, checking its teeth, then laid it back on the blanket. Its sibling stirred at the contact. The oldest, ever watchful, moved closer, resting its head across the pup's side as if to shield it from questioning hands. She finally spoke. "This one. It's not a dog, not fully." The man looked down again, tracing the shape of the small creature, now warm, now breathing, still holding on. "Coyote?" he asked. "Maybe," she said. "Or a hybrid. Hard to say without testing. But whatever it is, it's not supposed to be here. Not like this. In these rural areas, stray dogs were common. Coyotes, too, always at the edge of things. They crossed paths sometimes and shared territory. But for a coyote pup, or even a mix, to be found curled inside a litter of domestics, tended by what seemed to be an abandoned farm dog, was something else. Not impossible, but rare. Unlikely. And yet, there it was. The man watched as the pup stretched slightly beneath its sibling's weight. Its limbs were longer than the others, not by much, but enough to notice now. Its movements were different too, cautious, less erratic. It did not nuzzle blindly like the others. It seemed to hesitate before touching. The vet stepped away to record the details. The man remained, crouching beside the blanket. He didn't reach out. He just stayed. At one point, the hybrid pup turned its head toward him. Its eyes were open now, not wide, but aware, pale, flecked with gold. It blinked once, then closed them again. "Where did you come from?" he whispered. There were no answers, only breath and time. Later that evening, the vet returned with water warmed just above body temperature, mixed with a light electrolyte solution. She administered it to each pup slowly, watching their reactions. The hybrid was the last. She fed it only a few drops at a time, careful not to overwhelm it. It swallowed, then turned its head slightly, tongue flicking once. It didn't cry out. It didn't resist. In the days that followed, they settled into a rhythm. The man returned daily, sitting beside the blanket or helping with feedings. He never stayed long, just enough to check, to sit, to leave behind the stillness he carried. The oldest pup grew stronger first, legs regaining some stability, head lifting more often. It remained close to the others, even as its strength returned. It watched over them, especially the hybrid, curling around it when the lights dimmed and silence returned. That was what stood out most. Not the physical differences, not the uncertain lineage, but the bond that had formed in the absence of everything else. They had huddled together for warmth in the cold, shared silence in hunger, waited, and when one had found a way to seek help, it had done so, not for itself, but for them. The man spoke once more during a quiet moment when the others slept. Only the hybrid pup was awake, head resting on its paws, eyes half open. The man crouched again, his voice just above a whisper. "You weren't supposed to live," he said. "But you did." The pup blinked slowly, then let its eyes close. That night the clinic lights dimmed early. The room quieted into a gentle hum. Outside, the wind moved through the grass in long, soft strokes. Inside, 4 pups slept beneath a folded blanket. One of them, different from the rest, breathed softly beneath the curve of a sibling's chin. The man stood at the doorway a while longer before turning to leave. Behind him, nothing stirred, but the silence held something different now. Not absence, not fear, just rest, just life. By the end of the week, the rhythm in the clinic had softened into something close to calm. The sense of urgency had passed. There were no more trembling limbs or dry, gasping breaths, no more restless shifting in the night. What remained was quieter. the slow healing of small lives that had once slipped toward the edge of silence. The oldest pup had regained enough strength to walk, though it still carried a limp in its rear leg. It stayed close to the others, never straying far even as its confidence returned. When staff cleaned the bedding or changed the water bowls, it would stand at the edge of the enclosure, watching with still eyes, waiting for them to finish. Only once the others were settled again did it relax, curling back into its familiar spot, always near the smallest. The hybrid pup, now alert and steady, had not outgrown its differences. Its eyes were sharper, more watchful, its movements were measured and precise. It seldom cried, even when the others whimpered during sleep, but it responded to touch now. When lifted, it no longer went rigid. When its belly was rubbed with a warm cloth after feedings, it let out a sound just barely audible, a sigh of something like release. The connection between it and the older pup remained unchanged. They slept pressed together, fur touching fur, one head always turned toward the other. The man came every morning. He never asked to hold them. He never lingered long, but he watched them closely, his presence unassuming, his steps careful not to wake those still resting. He spoke softly, only once or twice, and only when the oldest lifted its head at the sound of the door. "You kept them here," he said one morning, voice low. "They stayed because of you." There was no movement in response, but the pup blinked slowly and placed its chin back down on the cloth beside the runt. Outside, autumn crept in quietly. Leaves began to dull at the edges. The air shifted, cooler now, with the faint scent of rain before it arrived. The days shortened, and light pooled longer in the corners of the building. The puppies, now fed and warm, slept through most of it, lulled by fullness and fatigue. What little energy they had was saved for brief flutters, stretching paws, nudging each other for warmth, and the occasional twitch of ears catching some distant sound. On the 7th day, the vet brought a new bed, a larger one, soft and low, with enough space for the growing bodies. The old blanket was folded and placed beneath the new cushion, holding their scent, the thread of memory not yet cut. One by one they were moved gently, placed in the new nest like fragile treasures. The man helped with care, lifting the oldest last. As soon as its paws touched the bedding, it turned, nosed the hybrid pup gently, then settled down beside it once more. That night, as twilight settled in and the clinic grew still, the man stayed longer than usual. He sat by the edge of the enclosure, elbows on knees, fingers loosely clasped. The pups were all sleeping now. The hybrid was curled into the hollow of the older pup's chest, its side rising and falling in slow rhythm. One of the others shifted in its sleep, letting out a faint sigh. The room smelt faintly of straw, warm milk, and something clean, the scent of rest. The man didn't speak this time. There was nothing to say. His eyes moved slowly across the pile of fur, pausing on the hybrid's narrow face, the shape of its long ears folded gently against its skull. It was a shape not born of farms or fence lines. It belonged to the edge of things, the places where wild brush met old roads and dusk came early. And yet here it lay, not apart, not rejected, held. The pups would grow. Some would find homes. Some might remain together. There were decisions to be made in the days ahead, assessments, space, safety. But not now, not tonight. Tonight, they remained like this, together in the hush, bellies full, limbs tucked close, breath soft. Outside, the last light faded behind the trees. A breeze moved through the dry grass, bending it gently toward the earth. In the quiet, something shifted, not loudly, not suddenly, just the slow and certain return of life where it had almost been lost. The man stood and stepped back. Behind him, the room remained still, and in the softness of that moment, trust lingered. Not loud, not named, but present, quiet as breath, lasting at dusk.